What's up, boxing fans? This is TBE Boxing back at you again. Today's topic: Billy Joe Saunders was totally unprepared. Well, let's put it to you like this. Today's topic is going to be after Canelo landed the first punch, Billy Joe realized winning the fight was not an option. Let's chop it up and see what it's all about. All right, so we're going to talk about this Billy Joe Saunders fight again. Uh, I rewatched the fight again, and I came to a few conclusions after watching the fight over again. And basically, just like the title of this broadcast says, you know, after Canelo landed the first punch, Billy Joe Saunders realized winning the fight was not an option. He basically went into survival mode after that. Okay, and if you watch the fight very closely, you will see that. Okay, let's just say that it was a disappointing performance by Billy Joe Saunders, to say the least. Okay, and there's a lot of things that we're gonna have to point out in this broadcast about that fight. Okay, for one thing, Billy Joe, did a lot of talking prior to the fight. Okay, he was talking a lot of smack. I mean, he was a lot of bravado, a lot of boasting. He talked about Gypsy King. He doesn't give a damn about Canelo. The way he was talking, the way Billy Joe was talking, you'd think that the fight was a foregone conclusion, according to Billy Joe. I mean, he was a lot of bravado, a lot of talking. He talked a good fight, but his performance in the ring was very disappointing. Okay, and really and truly, prior to this fight, I had spoken about the fact that this fight we're gonna see what Billy Joe is made of, and we actually did see what Billy Joe was made of, and Billy Joe, instead of being made of steel, he was basically made of aluminum. Okay, in this fight, he didn't really show much. Okay, I mean, again, we have to understand something about this fight with Billy Joe and Canelo. And like I spoke about a lot of these points in my pre-fight video, where I mentioned that the biggest factor in this fight was going to be the fact that Billy Joe Saunders has been very inactive in the past couple of years, and not just inactive, but inconsistent in his performances in the fights that he has had, and also the fact that he hasn't really been fighting in the top level of competition. Okay, so I mean, when you add all those three things together, it's a recipe for disaster, and this is what we saw. Okay, because you have to understand something about boxing. It's like anything else. You gotta practice makes perfect, and you gotta stay in the game to be in the game. You gotta be in it to win it. In other words, like even just a simple thing, we talk about like ring rust, for example. Okay, that's a serious thing in boxing. Okay, and if you're not fighting, consistently, ring rust will set in, and we saw that in the Billy Joe Saunders fight. I mean, uh, like, all right, for example, when you're in there fighting, boxing, as a sport is a tough sport, and you gotta stay in the mix to really be in the groove. You have to stay active. That's why people always talk about boxers staying active, and even just a simple thing of taking punches. When you're more active, you're more able to take harder shots because your body builds up resistance and you're used to that. Okay, and so you know when you're not active and your body don't get a chance to build up resistance, like what they call punch resistance, it's like your punch resistance goes down. Okay, we saw that again in the Billy Joe Saunders fight as well. Okay, Billy Joe has been out of boxing for so long, and not only out of boxing for so long, not been so inactive that his he wasn't able to absorb some of the punches that Canelo was landing, and Canelo was landing heavy shots. So just imagine, you haven't been in the ring for like a year and a half, you haven't really been fighting top quality opponents, and then they just throw you in the ring with a Canelo, and you haven't really fought anybody in a year and a half or such, and then before that you hadn't fought anybody in another year and a half. So Billy Joe's basically had like 2 fights in the past 3 years, okay? And then they throw him in the ring with a guy like Canelo and expect him to perform, and it's not going to happen, okay? And I said that that this ring rust, not just ring rust, but the inactivity was going to be a factor, a big factor, and it was a huge factor in this fight. Billy Joe was totally unprepared for what he faced in Canelo in that fight. Okay, let me repeat that. Okay, Billy Joe Saunders was totally unprepared for the reality that faced him in the Canelo Alvarez fight. Okay, he was totally unprepared, and that's his fault, and that's his team's fault as well. Okay, typically before you take a fight like the Canelo fight, as a boxer, you take a tune-up fight. You hear fighters talking about, oh, I need to get a tune-up fight. Billy Joe Saunders needed a tune-up fight or 2 before facing Canelo, but he went straight from not fighting anybody in a year and a half, and the person he fought a year and a half ago was Martin Murray, who was not exactly a scintillating fighter. Guy that retired after the fight after that fight, and then he went straight into a fight against Canelo. Okay, and you just don't do that. So a lot of people were expecting Billy Joe Saunders to upset Canelo. I wasn't really feeling that. I said in my interview, in my my pre-fight comments, that anything could happen in boxing, but Billy Joe beating Canelo was not likely to happen, and for the very reasons I gave, which is his lack of activity, his lack of facing quality opponents, and his inconsistency. Okay, so Billy Joe Saunders is basically more bark than bite. And so basically what we saw in this fight with Billy Joe Saunders and Canelo was that Billy Joe Saunders got exposed. Okay, he got totally exposed in this fight. And it's one thing to get exposed in a fight, but sometimes getting exposed, in a fight like Billy Joe just got exposed in this fight, could end your career. And we saw that this is potentially a career-ending injury for Billy Joe. We might never see Billy Joe in the ring again, and I wouldn't, that's a serious thing. I don't think he's going to come back. I think Canelo basically retired Billy Joe. Okay? And so, all this talk about gypsy magic and this, that, and the other, and all this gypsy bravado, it's all good when you're facing regular opponents, that you can flim-flam, okay? Because, that's what Billy Joe really was trying to do in this fight, was flim-flam, okay? He was a flim-flam man in this fight. They want to go in there, like after that first punch landed on Billy Joe, when he got hit to the body by Canelo, when that first punch landed, immediately after that, Billy Joe realized that there was no option for winning this fight, and that his only option was just survival. Okay, and that's what he did. He tried to survive for the rest of the fight, and you can see that if you watch the fight very closely. I'm not telling people anything that they shouldn't be able to see by watching the fight. Billy Joe barely did anything in that fight. Okay, he did a lot of flim-flam to make it look good. Okay, trying to look like he was doing something, but he wasn't really doing anything but trying to survive. Okay, and every time that Canelo landed a punch, it was like the earth shook for Billy Joe Saunders. You could see the effect that he had on him. Everything that Billy Joe did in that ring was to avoid getting another punch from Canelo. Okay. And it is what it is. But that's to be expected. When you talk about Canelo, you talk about a guy who's busy in the ring constantly. Okay, fighting 2 to 3 times a year, every year. Okay, so he stays busy. He's always fighting, and And he might not be fighting the absolute best opponents in the world or the best competition in the world, but he's fighting quality of people. Okay, good fight. And even if they're not that good, it's enough to keep him busy and keep him, sharp. So he stays sharp. Okay, and then on top of that, we have to understand something about Canelo, and Canelo is who he is, and we could talk about Canelo and say he's this or he's that, but one thing we can't really, dispute, and that is the fact that he has fought the best fighters in the world. Now we can say that he hasn't fought the best fighters at their prime, okay, like in the case of Austin Trout and Miguel Cotto, and but look at the people that he has fought, really. I mean, we have to be honest at this point. I mean, Canelo has fought Floyd Mayweather, Erislandy Lara, Miguel Cotto, Austin Trout. Now, just those four guys right there, okay? When you mention those four guys, we're talking about four of the best fighters of this generation, okay? That's clear. I mean, we're talking Erislandy Lara, Austin Trout, Floyd Mayweather, Miguel Cotto. We're talking about four of the best fighters of this generation, okay? And that's just four. And Canelo fought a lot more than that, okay? So Canelo, he hasn't fought them in their prime necessarily, but when he did fight them, they were still pretty good. And he fought some of the best fighters in the world, and at this point, and he definitely fought the best fighter of this generation in Floyd Mayweather, the fight that he lost. But that experience was invaluable. When you look at Billy Joe Saunders, nothing close, not even close. He hasn't fought anyone, really. Okay. So I mean, like I heard, I heard Canelo. I don't know if you guys saw when Canelo went into the when he was in the post-fight press conference, and Boo Boo Andre came in there and said that hey, what's up, Canelo? When we gonna get that fight on? And Canelo said, oh, you fight nobody, you fight nobody. But if you look at Billy Joe Saunders, who has he fought besides David Lemieux? Nobody really. Okay, he hasn't fought any really top tier opponents, really. I mean, and then he hasn't been fighting that much. He's very inconsistent in his, I mean, he's very inactive, and he hasn't really been fighting very much. And some of the fights that he has had, they were pretty, inconsistent in his performance. He did a good performance against David Lemieux. Didn't look that good against Martin Murray, even though Martin Murray, that was his last fight. Martin Murray was on his way out, and the fight before that, he didn't look very good either. Okay. So basically, Billy Joe has been up and down in his performances, and hasn't really been, he did fight Eubanks years and years ago. He fought Eubanks Jr., and he looked good in that fight against Eubanks, okay, but that was years ago. So, but recently, Billy Joe Saunders hasn't really been fighting anyone, and then when he did fight, he didn't really look that good, and the people that he did fight wasn't that, top quality opponents. So going in there to face Canelo in under those circumstances, okay, without any tune-up fight to get him sharp and to sharpen his skills, the results is what we saw, and it just goes to show you really how dangerous boxing can be when you're not in tip-top shape. And Billy Joe wasn't really in tip-top shape, okay. I mean, he looked okay, but again, I would think that Billy Joe needed a lot more training before facing a guy like Canelo. You can't underestimate a guy like Canelo. And with all the talk that Billy Joe was talking, putting up a good front, looking, but you saw that when he went in that ring and got that first punch land, it was a whole different ball game. And from right there, like I said, from the very first punch that landed, from the very first round, when Canelo connected with that shot, Billy Joe was in survival mode every minute after that. Okay, his whole game plan after that first punch landed from Canelo was survival. I gotta survive. Forget about winning. I gotta survive this fight. Okay, and that's basically what he was doing. And now, if you look at the fight, you saw that he was landing Oh yeah, Canigma, what's going on, brother? Yeah, you 100% right about that. It was it was written. I mean, even if Canelo didn't injure Billy Joe's eye, Billy Joe would have got knocked out eventually. I mean, it was written. You could see. I mean, it was clear as day. Canelo was slowly breaking him down. Every time Canelo landed a body shot, it was like light. It was like thunder. Okay, and you could see the effect he had on Billy Joe. He would get on his bicycle and ride like the devil was on his ass. Uh, he wanted no part of those punches, and this is why Billy Joe didn't really do anything in terms of offense because he was afraid of what Canelo was gonna, was gonna come back at him from Canelo. He couldn't, he never really threw the left hand. He just kind of kept it cocked, okay, and never let it go because he didn't want to get hit by Canelo. Okay, he just kind of just moved around the ring, jab, 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 and we all saw it. His jab wasn't really keeping Canelo at bay. Canelo just kind of just slowly stalked him and walked him down, and then we all saw what happened. Okay, I mean, Canelo came in there with a game plan. I mean, you saw like how Billy Joe, Billy Joe was. If you watch Billy Joe fight, you see that he keeps dipping down. I mean, which I don't understand that. I mean, here's Billy Joe. He's like 5'10", 5'11", whatever his height, and he's dipping down to Canelo's side. I mean, I don't understand. I'm leaning forward, on his front foot. I don't understand why he's doing that. Putting himself in Canelo's, like it's just bad habits. I don't think that's the way you should have fought Canelo. If you're gonna fight Canelo, you gotta fight Canelo. You should have fought Canelo tall, not dipping down to Canelo's level. I mean, how is Canelo landing an uppercut on a taller man? Shouldn't it be Billy Joe doing the uppercuts? He's a taller guy. So, but he's bringing himself down to Canelo's level. I think they studied Canelo. I mean, they studied Billy Joe. They see that he had that tendency. And you saw that Canelo was trying to land that punch the whole night until he finally did land the punch. But he was trying to land that punch from the very first round. That punch that caught Billy Joe. He fired that punch many times before he finally connected with a solid shot to the eye, and that ended the fight. But he was throwing that punch a lot, and he finally connected. So we saw that they came in with a plan, and that was part of their plan was to land that punch, and he did land that punch. Billy Joe, on the other hand, didn't really look like he had a game plan. Again, I mean, whatever game plan Billy Joe had, it didn't survive the first punch that landed from Canelo. After that punch landed, whatever plan that Billy Joe Saunders had went out the window. And his only plan from there on in was to survive. And we saw that. I mean, just look at the fight and you see for yourself. He kept running, he kept dancing around the ring, throwing the jab. I mean, you can't beat Canelo with just a jab alone. I mean, the jab is is a foundation punch, but you need something behind it. The jab is to set up the what is to follow, and nothing followed Billy Joe's jab. Every once in a while he threw a left hand, but he was always out of range, and he always missed that left hand. So Canelo had nothing to worry about from Billy Joe's left hand. He didn't really put any combinations together more than such, and abandoned that after I think he maybe threw one or two combinations for the whole fight. So Billy Joe was basically unprepared for this fight. Okay, totally unprepared. Didn't really understand what he was going to be dealing with when he got in that ring. And when he got in the ring and realized what he was dealing with, he realized right away that he was totally overmatched. Okay, and his only option again was just to survive, and that's what he tried to do, but unsuccessfully. He wasn't able to do it. Okay. Now, I mean, you can compare, if you compare Eris Landis-Lara fight to the way, even though Eris Landis-Lara was on his bicycle a lot in that fight, but it was a totally different fight than what Billy Joe fought. Eris Landis-Lara was actually trying to win the fight. Okay, don't even try to compare to Mayweather when he fought Canelo. I mean, that was a whole different ball. I mean, basically Mayweather put on a boxing clinic on how to fight a guy like Canelo. Okay, you got to make them miss, and you got to make them pay when they miss. Okay, Billy Joe was able to make Canelo miss sometime, but that was it. He couldn't do anything else. Okay, he barely, he was barely able to make Canelo miss, and when he made him miss, he couldn't make him pay. So Canelo really had nothing coming back at him in that fight, and he just walked Billy Joe down, and we saw what happened in the end. You know, there was no offense from Billy Joe, really. He never really threw the left hand that much, and when he threw, like I said, he was out of range because he didn't want to get in the range of Canelo's punches. He tried his best to stay, you know, he just threw the punch from way out, you know, where he knew he was going to miss. But, you know, he had to throw it once, at least a couple of times to make it look good, okay? But, that's all, you know, for me, that fight was just a situation where all Billy Joe actually did was try to stay from getting knocked out in that fight. And, you know, he fought in survival mode, you know what I mean? That's what it was. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, we all saw the fight. So all the talk that Billy Joe was doing prior to this fight, none of it panned out. None of it, you know, he didn't really do much. I mean, a lot of people were talking about how the referees, you know, was judging the fight, and we saw how some of the commentators was judging the fight. It was nowhere near close as they were saying it was. If you actually look at the fight closely, okay, I don't think Billy Joe won 2 rounds in that fight. If he did, if you won 2 rounds, it was a gift, okay. I doubt if he actually even won 1 round. Exactly, Canelo. That body positioning, and I think, like I said, that Canelo was looking for that. Okay, he kept trying to land that right uppercut the whole fight, and then he finally connected. You know, when Billy Joe leaned down, he kept leaning down, and you saw how the punch landed. I mean, Billy Joe leaned right into the punch, giving it even more force. Okay, he dipped down into the punch. Okay, so it was bad. You're right. Definitely had bad body positioning. He just wasn't ready. You know, his training wasn't. His training. He didn't have the right amount of training. Okay, He should have had a tune-up fight or two. Okay, he just wasn't ready to fight Canelo. And even if he was ready at his best, I don't think he had anything for Canelo anyway. At the end of the day, okay, because again, I'm telling you that in this fight, Billy Joe Saunders was exposed for what he is. Okay, undisciplined, inconsistent, a fighter that doesn't really stay busy, and it showed in this fight. It showed the training and the conditioning of Canelo, and the training and the conditioning of Billy Joe Saunders. You saw, you know, the difference. Okay, in this fight. Okay, we see that in this fight, Billy Joe was totally unprepared. You know, had no idea what he was going to face in that ring, and when he went in there and saw what he had to deal with, he was totally overwhelmed by the power, the discipline, and you know, of Canelo. I mean, you know, we saw that clear as day. So you know, and then, you know, we really saw that Billy Joe didn't really have much to offer against the Canelo. Okay, in terms of, you know, skill set, because he didn't really do much, you know, but throw the jab, and, you know, maybe once in a blue he threw a overhand left that always missed. Okay, he might have landed it once or twice, but other than that, that was it. He didn't, you know, have much of a punch selection. Okay, and he was never really, you know, in any position where we could say, okay, man, this is Billy Joe displaying some good skills like he did against Lemieux. Nothing like it. But you know, I had already said that, you know, in my pre-fight analysis, that, you know, we could say what we want about the Billy Joe and David Lemieux fight, but, you know, how good he looked and all that, but Canelo is no Lemieux. And again, we saw that as well. Okay, Canelo can box. He got skills, and I think Canelo is a better boxer than Billy Joe, and that showed in this fight as well. Okay, not only is he a stronger boxer, but he's a better boxer. Okay, Billy Joe looks good with that jab, moving around and all that, but once you get beyond that, there's nothing there. There was nothing there but the jab. Okay, and he was just moving around and, you know, and sticking the jab out there. But we saw that wasn't enough. That couldn't keep Canelo at bay. And Canelo just walked him down slowly but surely until he was able to land his punch, which was inevitable. If you saw the fight, that punch was going to land sooner or later. And every punch that Canelo landed, Billy Joe winced. You could hear him sometimes in there wincing. Ooh, ow! You know, like when Mike Tyson said he heard, I don't know who he was fighting, but he heard the guy wincing in there, so he went in there and, you know, he realized he was dealing damage. And this is what was going on in Billy Joe. So every time Canelo connected, Billy Joe didn't want any more. He did everything in his power not to get another a shot landed on him. And you know, and he fought a timid fight. He didn't fight an aggressive fight, not an offensive fight. He fought a defensive fight. And like I said in my post-fight comments, he fought to keep Canelo off of him. He didn't fight to win the fight, and we saw that as well. So at the end of the day, when we look at you know, Canelo's recent opponents, Billy Joe was one of the worst ones. Okay, in terms of what he had to offer in this fight, he didn't really offer much. Didn't offer much resistance to Canelo. Canelo basically just walked through him. Like I said, I don't think he was ever ready. Okay, you know, Billy was a soul vaccination. Billy's okay, made millions. Hopefully, some gold digging female does not take his hard-earned money. That's what they do. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's okay, but I mean, I hope that money is enough for his retirement, because he's basically retired at this point, you know, with that type of injury. Okay, I don't really, I mean, see him coming back. And if he did come back, who's he gonna fight? You know, maybe Andre at 160. I don't know. Billy, I think it's over for Billy Joe. Okay, and you know, I doubt if that money that he got is going to be enough to last him, you know, for the rest of his career. You know, he might have to come back and fight again. Okay, at the end of the day, just to get a payday. Okay, but after this performance, I don't really, you know, see him getting much money in any fight after this. I mean, a lot of people was, you know, like saying that he was putting up a tough fight. No, not really. He wasn't a tough fight at all for Canelo. Okay, you know, Billy Joe looked okay. You know, I mean, but to me, he was more front than anything. He was just fronting most of the time in there. You know, just front and flash to make it look okay for the judges. But in reality, he was just in survival mode. Okay, and he had nothing really to offer Canelo in this fight. And you know, like I said, we all saw the fight. Canelo just walked through him and knocked him out, really. And he, you know, if he wasn't for the eye injury, he would have been knocked out cold in that fight eventually. You know, maybe by the 11th or 10th round or somewhere around there. You know, that injury was, you know, that punch that landed. If he hadn't broken his eye socket, it still would have been the beginning of the end for Billy Joe Saunders. You know, it was just a matter of time. And you know, so at the end of the day, you know, yeah, well, you're right. Soul vaccination. Billy really. It's not that. All right, let's take that. I'm not going to say that Billy has no power. Okay, I wouldn't go so far to say that he has no power, but he wasn't fighting offensively. In other words, he wasn't sitting down on his punches because he was too busy running. He was too busy trying to keep away from Canelo's power. You can't. You're not going to sit down on your punches against a guy. You know, for you to sit on your punches, you have to take just a fraction of a second more of time to do that. And just that fraction of a second more of time could be the difference between you getting knocked out, you know, by a punch from Canelo. Because you're going to take the time to sit on your punches, you might get caught. You know, so he wasn't able to sit on his punches. He just basically threw a lot of arm punches. Okay, so that's why he doesn't. You know, none of his punches really did anything to Canelo because he wasn't. You know, he wasn't sitting on his punches. He was too busy trying to get away from Canelo. He was trying to not to get hit by Canelo, and so he didn't want to, you know, risk, you know, Canelo being able to land. So he just landed fast punches that looked okay, but didn't really have nothing behind them whatsoever. So you know, that's basically what it comes down to. Yeah, you know, Billy Joe was a very disappointing performance, really, to say the least. Okay, but that's what happens when you're not prepared. And Billy Joe wasn't prepared for this fight. Okay. You know, he was not prepared. Like I said, Billy Joe needed a tune-up fight before he fought Canelo. Okay, definitely a tune-up fight. Without probably even two tune-up fights. Okay, before he faced a guy like Canelo, and he didn't have any tune-up fights. He's been sitting on the sidelines for a year. And you know, Billy Joe is not the most disciplined guy in the world. Okay, we're looking at a guy who probably drink, smoke, do all the things that you know that Tyson Fury does. Okay, used to do or whatever. You know what I mean? These guys are not known for their discipline. Okay, they blow up between fights. They they do a lot of stuff that they're not supposed to be doing in the ring. You know, these are gypsies. You know that they live a gypsy lifestyle. They're fighting men. You know, they see themselves as fighters. You know, yeah. So yeah, Canelo. Yeah, you're right, Kanik. There was no power to respect. I mean, Canelo realized that Billy Joe was just in survival mode, so he just went in there and took him out. Okay, I mean, there was no power from Billy Joe. Like I said, he wasn't sitting on his punches. He was just touching Canelo and moving. Okay, just to make it look good. Okay, I mean, I'm telling you, from the very first round, Billy Joe was in survival mode. When that first punch landed from Canelo, and Billy Joe realized, Billy Joe said, "Well, what the fuck?" I mean, he realized that this is a whole different level that he was dealing with right there and then. Okay, when that punch landed, because it's it's bad enough that Canelo would have gave Billy Joe Saunders trouble even if he came in the best condition that he ever was in his life. But he came into that fight, like I said, not being in the ring for over a year and a half, like somewhere around there. And so when you're not in the ring for that long, your body, is not used to the punches, of a regular boxer, much less a guy like Canelo who has power. So his body wasn't really ready to absorb those type of punches that Canelo was landing. Okay, because he hadn't been in the ring to be able to, get his body acclimated to those type of punches, against, other fighters. That's what happened when you're at the ring for so long. So, that's what happened. So we saw that, it was a disappointing performance to say the least. Canelo, again showed why, he's up there. You can see that he was well prepared, in, in great condition, and ready to go the full 12 round, while Billy Joe was not. Okay, I think Billy Joe would have gassed out probably by around the 10th round if the fight had continued. Okay, I don't think he was in tip-top shape at all. He was in, you know, uh, eye shape. He looked like he was in shape, but he wasn't really in top shape. I don't think. And usually Billy Joe's the kind of guy who relies on his, so-called quote unquote slickness to get by. Basically Billy Joe is an underachiever. Okay, he doesn't really live up to his full potential. Never did, and he just usually in his fights, with the skill that he has, he's able to flim flam a lot of these guys that he fought and get over that way. But when you run up into a guy like Canelo who was prepared and ready to fight and is in great condition, then that's when you realize that your approach to the way you fight has to be, you have to come with something even more. You have to come with something better. And Billy Joe didn't have anything to draw upon in that fight. Okay, all his usual flim flam tactics didn't work. And when you compare the fight, like you compare the Canelo fight, you compare the way Mayweather fought Canelo to the way Billy Joe fought Canelo, and you can see a vast difference in skill level and skill set. Okay, we saw how Mayweather was able to stay in the pocket with Canelo, out punch him sometimes in the sense that he would punch it, with using hand speed. Okay, we saw Mayweather staying right in front of Canelo, making a miss, doing the shoulder roll, doing the check hook. You know what I mean? Jabbing him, uppercuts. We saw a whole repertoire of punches that Mayweather used and punch selection that Mayweather used in this fight against Canelo. He went into he used every punch in the book basically. Used every skill at his disposal. Displayed various different type of skills in that fight against Canelo. Billy Joe Saunders displayed none of that. Nothing close. He wasn't even close. It was nowhere close to not even to the way Landon Laura fought Canelo, or even Austin Trout, put up a way much better fight against Canelo. Miguel Cotto, all these guys, gave Canelo a real fight. Okay, the fight that we saw with Saturday with Canelo and Billy Joe was nothing. It was a joke. Billy Joe didn't put up was no, he didn't put up much of an effort against Canelo compared to guys like Miguel Cotto, Austin Trout, Eris Landis Laura. And we could even never even compare to what Mayweather did. Okay, so I mean, at the end of the day, it wasn't a very good performance, uh, and it showed a Billy Joe Saunders that was pretty limited in skill set and versatility. And again, when faced with a guy like Canelo, we saw that his only option was basically just to survive, try to survive, and he couldn't do that either. Wasn't able to last the whole fight. Okay, so it is what it is. But that's. I mean, I watched the fight. Again after the first night. I watched it again. I looked at it very closely this time, and I realized that you know Billy Joe Saunders didn't really offer Canelo much resistance in that fight. Okay, if you watch it closely, you'll see that. And it was just another Canelo freight train rolling over another opponent. And it looks like Billy Joe Saunders is probably going to be. It looks like Canelo has basically retired Billy Joe Saunders at this point. But he's lucky he got away. He got away with. He could have been hurt even worse. Okay, you can't go in that ring against a guy like Canelo and not be prepared. And Billy Joe wasn't really prepared. Okay, it was a money grab at the end of the day. A big payday. He took the payday, and that was that. Okay, didn't really get himself in tip-top conditioning. But like I said, regardless of what he did, I think that he needed at least one or two tune-up fights before he fought Canelo, and he didn't do none of that. So we saw the result of that. His inactivity was the biggest problem for him, and the fight played out the way it did because of his inactivity for the most part. That was the biggest factor in the fight, I think. And the rest is history. So yeah, uh, you know, again, the thing about Canelo now is who's Canelo gonna fight next? I mean, it looks like Caleb Plant. Hopefully, Caleb Plant can do a better job. Which I'm thinking that anyone can do a better job than what Billy Joe did. Okay, so Billy Joe didn't really do much. So I'm pretty sure it didn't. It's not a high mark. It didn't leave a high mark, and I'm pretty sure that Caleb Plant will do much better than what Billy Joe did. I'm not saying that Caleb Plant would win against Canelo. I don't know. I gotta examine the fight. I'm gonna have to watch some fights of Plant and see, where he's at right now, and then I'll be able to determine, and make a video about, what that fight is gonna look like. But I'm pretty sure whatever that fight looks like, gonna be better than what Billy Joe did. I'm pretty sure of that because Billy Joe basically did nothing. Okay, nothing at all. Total disappointment in that fight. And so, he got the beating he deserved, okay, for talking a lot of crap, okay, and a lot of bravado and not being really prepared for the fight. He got a well-deserved ass whooping, and it is what it is. So much for Billy Joe Saunders at this point. Looks like again, like his career could possibly be over as a real, fighter at at that level, okay. Which I don't think he was on that level in the first place, but 'cause he never really fought anybody to be on the level of Canelo. He wasn't really ready for this fight in any way, shape, or form, and shouldn't have even got the fight. But he's a champion, so it is what it is. I mean, but when you face a guy like Canelo, you got to be ready, and Billy Joe Saunders wasn't ready. Okay, so I mean, you know, I I don't know about Caleb Plant and what he's going to be doing or how he can beat a Canelo, but he's a bigger guy than Billy Joe. He's a natural super middleweight, so he might have a better shot at it. He's probably a sharper puncher, probably have a little more skill and actual real skill than what Billy Joe. I don't think Caleb Plant is just a flim flam guy like what Billy Joe is in there flim flamming people, and not being disciplined in his training and that type of thing. So I think maybe Caleb Plant is a bit more disciplined, probably a lot more disciplined, and he's probably, Well, I don't say, I'm not going to say probably. I'm pretty sure he's going to put a better fight than Canelo, than Billy Joe Saunders did. Okay, a more respectable performance, I would think. Okay, because I said again, like I said, prior to the fight, in my pre-fight video, Billy Joe Saunders has been very inconsistent in his, his performances, and this is another example of that inconsistency. In this fight, very inconsistent, very poor performance. Okay, and I'm pretty sure anybody else can do a much better job at that. I mean, you know, even Callum Smith went the distance. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. So at this point, I think the fight that we need to see, is Canelo versus Bubu Andre. Okay, maybe even Canelo versus Charlo. Those fight need to happen. Or even Charlo versus Andrade. That fight needs to happen. You know. So I mean, again, this whole, I saw when Canelo said that, oh, who was Andre fought, when Andre said, hey, what are we gonna fight? He said, oh, you won't fight nobody, you terrible fighter. Well, I mean, if that's the case, if he's a terrible fighter, then go and take the belt from him. I don't understand this talk about a fighter is a terrible fighter, a fighter hasn't fought nobody, but you don't want to fight him. If you're telling me that this fighter hasn't fought nobody, he doesn't have a record, he's fighting a terrible fighter, then go and take the belt from him. Don't tell me about how a terrible fighter he is and how he hasn't fought nobody. I don't want to hear that. I want to. If that's the case, then go take his belt. It's all bullshit. I mean, I don't know what these people come, but these are the talking points these people come up with. All these guys using the Errol Spence talking point. You know what I'm saying? So this is, Canelo is up there talking about, oh, you're not fighting nobody. Well, who the hell did Yildirim fight before he fought Canelo? What the hell are you talking about? I mean, Yildirim had a. Did Yildirim have a belt? Bubu Andre is WBO champion. He has a belt. What do you mean? Who are you? He haven't fought nobody. Who did Yildirim fight? Who did Fielding fight? Who did Callum Smith fight? I mean, what the hell is Canelo talking about? So, I mean, it's very suspect when we hear these kind of talk from people from boxing about another fighter that haven't fought nobody. Well, nobody want to hear that bullshit. Fight the guy, then if he hasn't fought nobody, take his belt, and if he's not that good. Don't tell me he's not good. Go in the ring and show us that he's not good. Okay? So all this talk that Canelo is doing about, oh, you a terrible fighter, you a terrible fighter, it was a joke. I mean, to me, it was embarrassing for Canelo, sit there, talking that foolishness. You know what I'm saying? I mean, another fighter coming to your, I mean, this shit reminds me so much of Errol Spence that it's not even funny. It's like when Errol Spence said he doesn't know why Crawford is coming to his fights. So you have Canelo in there talking about, oh, get out of my press conference. That's what fighters do. You go to the other fighters' press conference and you call them out. That's what you're supposed to do. So what is Bubu Andre not doing anything wrong? He's doing what he's supposed to do. But Canelo wants to throw him out of the press conference instead of, dealing with the whole situation as a fighter and saying, okay, so you want to fight me? Maybe we can make the fight. Maybe we can't make the fight. I don't know, whatever. But you can't just kick the guy out of your press conference and say, that's some Errol Spence move that, I don't know why this guy's coming to my press conference. I don't really understand that. To me that was a, disgrace from Canelo. Okay, I didn't like that look at all. I thought that was ridiculous. I mean, the guy is coming there. He's been calling you off for years now. You were, say you're gonna fight him or you're not gonna. Don't sit here talking about he ain't fought nobody and he's a terrible fighter. Well, if he's a terrible fighter, go and take his belt then. You know what I'm saying? I think, but at this point, I think that now that Canelo has the WBO belt, okay, I'm pretty sure that Andre can move up now and fight Canelo at 168. He can do that. He's the WBO champion at 160. Canelo is the WBO champion at 168. He could even possibly get in there and demand a fight from Canelo before Canelo fight Caleb Plant. Okay? I mean, I'm not sure how the rules work, but I'm pretty sure he can, just like how Crawford came from 140 and demanded a fight with Jeff Horn at 147 and was able to get the fight because that's the way the WBO works. It should work the same way for Andre. So Andre might have a chance to finally get a shot at Canelo now because Canelo just picked up that WBO belt. So he can demand a fight with Canelo and Canelo would have to fight him. Okay, so I'll drop the belt. So we'll see how that plays out. But hopefully, Andre is pursuing that avenue right there, and and decide to drop his belt at 160, move up and challenge Canelo at 168. That's the only way he's going to get that fight from Canelo, because Canelo is not going to fight him any other way. I don't think, because Canelo realized that Andre is a whole different ball game, than a guy like Billy Joe. Billy Joe Saunders is basically, basically perpetuated the fraud in this fight, really. Okay, he wasn't ready for this fight. He wasn't prepared to fight Canelo. He just took the money and run. Okay, wasn't ready at all. And that's what, I mean. I'm not trying to get on Billy Joe, but it is what it is. We gotta call it as we see it. Okay, and Billy Joe's performance in this fight was very disappointing, to say the least. Was not ready for this fight. Basically, just took the money and ran. And you see what happened when people try to do that, take the money and run. We saw he got his eye socket damaged and could probably be retired now from boxing, because he was never really prepared to face Canelo in the first place. Okay, so it is what it is. But yeah, looking forward to see who Canelo's gonna fight next. I mean, if he fight Caleb Plant, it's all good. But I would love to see the fight with Andrade, and eventually with uh, Charlo. I would like to see Charlo and fight Andrade. I mean, you got all these middleweights up there. All of them. None of them doing. Now you got Arislanda Lauro with the WBA belt up there as well. Now, hopefully, we could see him fight somebody. But middleweights, you got Murata, uh, you got Charlo, you got Billy Joe. Okay. Uh, I think Canelo has a title at 160 pounds as well. I don't know what belt it is, or if it's franchise belt or whatever. But these middleweight fighters need to be fighting each other. But you have Charlo ducking Andrade, using the same lame excuse from 10 years ago about him pulling out of a fight, 15 years ago, whatever the hell that was, how long ago that was. I mean, it's a weak excuse. That was 10 years ago, and this is now. I mean, so and then you got Jamel Charlo out there talking about they want to blackball Andrade, but I think again it's just an excuse for ducking. I mean, I'm really surprised that Jamal Charlo. I thought that he was going to be the more accomplished of the Charlo brothers, but it looks like it's definitely going to be. It's definitely Jamel Charlo the more accomplished one now. I mean, a few years ago it looked like he was the sky was the limit for Jamal Charlo, but he hasn't really stepped into the plate. Hasn't really done anything at middleweight division. Okay, hasn't really done much. Hasn't really accomplished much. Hasn't really been fighting much either. So big disappointment. In Jamal Charlo at middleweight. I thought that he was going to be taking on all the middleweight guys and trying to get unified, but he hasn't even looked like he hasn't even thought about unifying. He doesn't want no part of Andre. He didn't fight Murata. You know, I mean, it's surprising to say the least. Didn't want to, I mean, I mean, his next fight coming up, Montiel, whoever that is. I saw that Montiel guy. The guy looks terrible. So Jamal Charlo has been a big disappointment to say the least at the middleweight. Okay, I'm sorry, but doesn't impress at all. Looks like he's ducking any real good fights, and it is what it is. But yeah, the middleweight division needs to step up their game. Uh, you know, uh, all these guys look like they're waiting around to get a fight with Canelo at the end of the day. So I don't know. Middleweight division is very disappointing at this point. Okay, not much action at middleweight. Okay, and these guys really need to step up their game. So Canelo look like it's gonna be Caleb Plant next. We'll see how that fight plays out. Maybe Caleb Plant got the skills, but like I said, I can't really talk much about Caleb Plant yet until I watch more of his fights and see what he actually has to offer. And then I'm gonna make some videos about Caleb Plant and what this fight with Canelo is gonna look like if this fight does happen, in September, like we hear them talking about. Okay, but like I said, I don't think Caleb Plant could do any worse than what Billy Joe did. I don't think anyone could do any worse than what Billy Joe did. Okay, uh, so it is what it is. But if Canelo, like I said, I don't think Canelo is gonna fight a guy like just by his reaction, the way he reacted to Andre, you could tell that Canelo don't want no part of Andre at any point. Okay, he totally, was just like, he looked disgusted that Andre showed up. I think that he's really afraid of Andre, the skills of Andre, and all this talk about, you don't fight nobody and you're a terrible fighter. Who you fought? Who you fought? I think that's just a cover. I think he realizes that if Andre will probably give him his toughest fight of his career, and I don't think he's ready to deal with that. Okay, I think I think that this talk about Andre not being but Andre being a terrible fighter is nonsense. About who Andre has fought, I think it's more nonsense. Okay, because like I said, who did Yildirim fight? How did Yildirim get a shot at him? Yildirim had no belt. Yildirim had no record. No, I mean, Yildirim. I mean, I don't even think Yildirim is in the top 50. Okay, so what? I mean, so did you ask Yildirim any of those questions about did you say that Yildirim was a terrible fighter? With the Yildirim actually he's a terrible fighter? So I mean, you have a guy there with a WBO belt, been calling you off for years. So yeah, I'm not feeling what Canelo was talking about with Andre at all. I think it's just he's covering up the fact that he doesn't want to fight uh, Boo Boo Andre. I think he realizes that's his team. Him and his team realizes that's going to be a difficult fight, and they don't want that fight right now for Canelo. Okay, maybe he might decide to fight him after he becomes undisputed. We'll see. But again, I think the only way that Boo Boo Andre is going to get that fight is to move up and challenge Canelo at 168 pounds using the WBO rules. Okay, by challenging the current WBO champion at the weight above you. That's the only way he's going to get that fight, I would think. And I think he should take the opportunity and do that. Okay, hopefully he's on it already. He should. I would have filed the paperwork already to get that fight going. I wouldn't even wait. Okay, so let's hope that's what's going to happen. But yeah, a disappointing performance from Billy Joe Saunders. Okay, to say the least. He didn't make the Gypsies look very good in that fight. Didn't make Britain look good either. He basically went in there against Canelo to survive after that first punch landed, and he realized that what the hell he was facing. He was like, "Oh my God, what did I get myself into?" Billy Joe, say it ain't so, Billy Joe. Billy Joe went in there, took an L, sold his old, what I'm saying, for not much. And, I would probably go into retirement at this point based on what that injury looked like. Pretty serious injury to the eye. So it is what it is. But that's what happens when you get into that ring. You're not really prepared to deal with what you're dealing with. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. But I'm going to leave it here for now. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Okay, you go to TBEBoxing.com. You can get some TBE Boxing merchandise. You can donate if you want to. You can get the latest boxing news, headlines, and analysis. All the boxing news and headlines are updated daily. Okay, so you get new content daily on TBEBoxing.com. New articles, all the latest articles on boxing, okay, and MMA. You'll get that as well. Fresh articles daily. So log on to TBEBoxing.com and see what all the fuss is about. Make sure you like and subscribe to TE Boxing on YouTube. Okay, hit the bell icon to get the latest. I'm gonna try to do more videos, live videos in the morning around 9 o'clock or so. I'll be doing my videos from now on, live videos that is. I'll be doing videos throughout the day, other than that, but I'm gonna start at 9 o'clock in the morning and start, doing videos around that time, 9, 10 o'clock, around 9 o'clock, more than likely. So yeah, this is TBE Boxing. Thanks for all of the whoever showed up. See you on the next one. That's all I have for right now. I'm out.